Thank you, Alice. It's been really quite challenging, to say the least, for us, for everybody. But I must say that I could not complain because I'm one of the privileged persons that have work and have a house to where that work can be done. So actually, it's in that sense, I've been enjoying myself being where I am. And yeah, we have been having to deal with that sort of immense range of things that we have been doing in online working since March 13. But I think it's had been for us an incredible moment and opportunity for reflection, not only because we're sitting literally in an incredibly privileged ground, and therefore we're being able to have the time and God thank the conscience of reflecting of what we're doing, no, and where we are, and hopefully for that going out in a in better shape, and for working really for the things that we're trying to work since the beginning in this office, no. And this reflection has been happening through years and years, but especially it came really together these past few months. And it doesn't come alone, and it wasn't not only because of the pandemic, but I have been reflecting on really how to really include a diverse range of opinions in the way I do my architecture. And probably in the beginning, it was too innocent or too direct as just, you know, collaborating with others, trying to think that I would listen to those people that would use the spaces. And, you know, trying to open in channels to create more direct ways of communicating to those people who we work with. I think that's a start, but I have really understood that we need to really completely change the way we do things in order to have the real possibility of doing an architecture that becomes a platform for everybody to exist, you know, and live in. So with all that we have been doing and reflecting, I was part of this movement for women's rights, but that started really because of an emergency in Mexico of a huge problem of feminicides last year. And that ended in several protests that happened in November, in February, and then culminating in March 8th in the International Women's Day. I have to say that I never had been, how to say it, I've always been a feminist, but I've never been so outspoken about it, because I thought that if I would speak about it, I would make a difference of it. But little by little, I have understood that it's very important, because we as are in a position of equality, one of the most privileged positions in the world, because I must say that in my surroundings, I have that. We should fight for the 90% or 95% of the world that doesn't have that. So, so I understood that I had to take a position, and I understood that I had to really see where I could lead my practice in order to create a really open opportunities for those who have no opportunities, no, in the true sense, and not only in the true sense of, you know, kind of confronting those established ideas or that I was born with. And so I started to create a reflection upon that, and then I was invited by Gabriela Carrillo, another Mexican architect, to do a talk among Mexican women architects on that day, on March 8th in Oaxaca, which also Oaxaca has is one of the states which has the most inequalities in Mexico and the worst conditions for people in the whole state. So it was interesting, the place, but also the setting. So Frida Escobar, Gabriela Carrillo, Loretta Castro, Rosana Montiel. We got together to speak. Each of us, we presented our own work. And I decided to create a reflection on how my work has promoted, that was my idea, equality and women's values. And then I understood that my work doesn't do that, and actually is part of the system that discriminates. So I started doing a reflection, and I'm gonna give a little bit of that ideas that I presented that day here. Now I'm gonna share my screen. I hope I do it right. Okay, here it is. Can you see my screen?
That's great. Thanks, Tati. Yeah.
Perfect. As I said, I presented this lecture first on March 8th. Well, it has, I did adapted it for today, and it has been adapted these past months. In March 8th on Oaxaca. And although I understand that probably, you know, a power relationship is part of our human condition, and that it's part of our lives since ever, I do understand also that there are ways that we can really create better and more healthy relationships towards a more equal future. And we hadn't done that, you know, through history. What we have done is actually create the country, no? And the system that we act with, that we live right now, the system needs discrimination in order to subsist. You know, capitalism cannot subsist if it doesn't discriminate a whole big amount of people in the world, discriminating not only people but also the place we live, nature, the resources we live in, and exploiting them to specific purposes. So I think one of the key moments in history on how it has accelerated and arrived to the point where we are at now is the conception of private property, no, which was kind of, could be said that it was in England and the 13th, 14th century, where the commons were reformated into private land. And that definitely had done that there is an underlying condition that there's someone that has to stay at home taking care of the household, no? What happened was that naturally women were those who were there. Why? Because obviously there's a physical, you know, imposition, which is, or not an imposition. I believe it's a huge opportunity, because it's that we give birth, we give life, and we feed those children in the first years in order for them to become healthy grown-ups. So I think that that condition, and when private property really limited the possibility of having larger compounds with people cooperating with each other, and reducing it to just the people from the household, really created a system that has perpetuated the discrimination of women, no, through the reclusion of women to the household with no remuneration at all for reproductive or domestic work. So I think that that is kind of the stories that we have to start to understand in order to break and erase those possibilities, no? It was not until really, really recent that I understood, and the New York Times published it, that the size of the economy, it's really not real, because it never includes what it's supposed to be a wage for women doing reproductive and domestic labor. So according to the New York Times, women unpaid labor is worth an amount of money that you can see in the screen that I cannot even say, trillions of dollars every year if it's paid with a minimum wage. So that is, for me, an understanding of women subsidizing the economy as we know it. No, there would be no way that the economy right now really pays women in order for these jobs that they do that are essential for us to really exist, for the economy to exist. So if we think that that subsidy, that huge subsidy of women in economy is what makes the economy really what it is today, we really need to think probably how the society is laid off. But well, that is something that we as society need to reflect upon. But I think that, and it's not only women that are subsidizing the economy. Obviously, I think that one of the most interesting things that I've read is an article in Charlie Hebdo of this pandemic, that one of the things we need to understand about it is that the essential workers of a city are those who can't stop and are those who are paid the less. So if we think that our essential necessities are really underpaid, then we really have to shift completely the pyramid in a different direction, no? And that doesn't come just like that. That also is really the understanding on how we have laid off our complete way of doing and creating cities and spaces that we built on. So those are part of the system. I understand that I am part of that system, and this is why I decided that day to declare myself guilty of being part of this system that perpetrates discrimination as its own, no? And why? Because since the most basic structures, as the domestic space, where we even create these structures for the nuclear family to exist in a space that it is really an imposition to the impossibility of the emancipation of one member of the family. Let's say that there exists equality in a household, and that women and men share the domestic and reproductive job, is still an unpaid labor, and is still someone has to stay in order to sustain it, because if it's underpaid, there's someone that has to stay at home, that has to do all that labor, and there's the other one that has to go and look for some waged labor that will really maintain and sustain the household, because we're not sustainable by itself, you know. But also that system, and perpetuating that and jumping a lot of steps, but also really is the system that it's destroying our environment. In this case, I also have been doing in parallel a reflection that has to do with the respect of the other, has to do with the inclusion of the other, which also goes back to the idea of discrimination. No? If we're not able to talk to the other, to understand that there's this other that thinks opposite of you, and you have to really accept that is the way they think, and that is how they should be thinking. There's no way we are understanding nature. There's no way we understand the stages of relationships that we have to have with our other, but with our other environment, with our other place, with our other whatever, you know. So this is why I also have been doing this parallel reflection on how the closer and the more understanding of the relationship towards another human being would really be directly, immediately change the relationship that we have towards our environment. And we cannot say that we have not been part of that, no? Because we have done typical domestic spaces that create an imposition towards a woman to emancipate, or a man to emancipate from and reproductive labor. We have done a lot of architecture that has really harmed the environment. It is a harmful relationship to start with, but how can we create a better one? We have tried to promote the possibility of affordable housing and an open and diverse space that would include more people, but still is part of this system that reproduces and reproduces discrimination and imposes power. We have, how can we start thinking, no? How can we start really understanding that we have the tools? I really agree that architecture can't do it all, but I think that architecture, it is a very important part of our lives, and that definitely architecture, architecture really can open paths for those relationships to change, no? And so why don't we start thinking on the domestic realm, and why don't we start reflecting on what have we done for it and what can be done, you know, as thinking it of the most intrinsic relationship between human being and its immediate other, and the human being and its immediate surrounding, because it's the most important basic necessity of the built environment. That one space that protects us, that allow us to construct us, and that allow us also to be one of the first representative spaces that allow us to form our own identity, to then become those social entities that we are. So in terms of that, I think that the core discussion could come back down to that of the kitchen, no? That of the space that we have been transforming from a very interesting kind of evocative, ritualistic moment in life towards a really functional necessity solved space, you know? And how can we really understand that the possibility of opening paths towards a more collective way of eating, of finding our way of cooking, of eating, of sitting with each other, not only because of the production of the food, but also because of the act of eating, no? And this thing we were able to really see very directly happening when we were rebuilding houses in little towns after the earthquake in 2017, where really cooking is still a ritual, is still a shared place for the family, but not only for the nuclear family, for the family that they call the family their own small community. A place where the exchanges happen in the most natural and intense way. A place where someone brings the corn for the tortillas, the other one cooks for the kids, the elders make the amusement of the really back up the ritual of the food, along the food. And how can we learn from that? How can we really explore the possibility of extending that in the domestic realm and in the built environment? Can we do that even in cities, in places where relationships have been really banned from one household to the next one? Can we really understand that the possibility of opening the kitchens towards a different use, towards a different possibility of individualization versus collectivity could happen? Yesterday we had a really interesting discussion in a conference in India, where someone was saying specifically about those binaries. No, I think that even in when we speak about cities, is even more present. It's either the very individualistic space of living for the nuclear family, you know, or it's that huge collective. Can we find a place in between where those negotiations can happen? I think architecture could do that. No, I think architecture could easily start moving those spaces. We did these houses where people could really choose the way they lay out their kitchen. So a guy would use their kitchen to sell things. Another family would decide to open the kitchen to the more living space of the family. Or should we think in a direction of having kitchens that move with you, that are part of the individual space, but also can be part of that collective and be put in the hallways of housing units? This is also a reflection that we did some time ago in 2014, where we were called to design a kitchen of the future. And we thought of a kitchen that could be that beautiful kitchen that everybody's aiming for, but a kitchen that would move and could transform in the interior, but also that could be brought anywhere. And we did that. We did that in this house in Monterrey, where we decided that the kitchen could be that is a part of the living space, but also that kitchen could be moved to the exterior, to the terrace, to be a more shared space, or even just a space that transforms from one day to the other one. I would say that right now I would like to take the idea of the kitchen even further, to understand if that is one of the points that could allow us to break these impositions for women to stay home and have to do their reproductive work. And going on to the reflection of the ritualistic part is, can we think also on the bathroom? Why did we just really, after the Industrial Revolution, have really relegate the idea of taking care of our bodies in many ways to a merely functional space? What happened with all those possibilities of those ritualistic moments in life about taking care of ourselves? And I think that the reduction of that to a single space that we have done, it's really taking out the importance of it. It's really not allowing us to understand how important it is first to take care of ourselves, then to understand how to be able to share that with others and to take care of others, no? And right now, I think that in this moment with this pandemic, we can really start thinking that that really the health can start with us, can start in our own private space, but it means that if we are healthy in our own private space, we are able to take care of the whole collective, no? And how can we start really bringing back the idea of that be one of those rituals in life? Again, going back to those essential needs that are those we are relegating to a mere functional aspect in our lives, that I think is really taking the importance to the really important points in our lives. No, so obviously we have created different types of bathrooms that allow different types of possibilities, but not that different. We have never gone through the reflection of understanding that the bathroom could also be this place of self-emancipation in a way, no actualization of it with a social aspect of it. When did we decided that sharing a bath in a collective space was wrong, and why did we decided it was wrong? How can those intimate relations that were placed in those ancient baths, where are they now? They just I think they just disappeared. Then the reflection goes to the area of sleep. I think this should really become this very intimate space where it is the only very intimate space where you can restore yourself, you know, literally in many dimensions. And I think I've been speaking of these specific areas because of the work we've been doing in a monastery in Germany. We have been working with the Cistercian monks for 3 years now, and I think that having understood obviously their spirituality through their rituals has allowed me to understand how those rituals are those who are knitting together all these possible relationships, not only with themselves, with their own spirituality, but also with the other in their community and with the other in the external community. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more further in advance. So how can we think that those private spaces are those really key moments or key spaces where the individual could be connected to itself or to its very intimate people who they share the space with, and how those spaces are really the spaces who give you the possibility of their own understanding, your own self-esteem, and therefore your own self-identity. How can we transform then those sleeping areas into that, and really start to putting them, you know, in the base of the pyramid, in the important part of the pyramid, to towards the construction of the rest of the space, no? And I'm showing some of the spaces that we have designed and that obviously reflect this very specific, intimate space that has this clear expression of its own identity, no? And or the family's own identity. Then what is about the house? What is about the notion of the typology we call the house? Can we rethink those terms in creating those spaces for living, but that doesn't necessarily represent this ideal house, that dream house that we all in the world have in mind as the perfect space, but who actually clearly are part of this system that are discriminating individuals, but also the society at large. And this is a reflection that we have done also in the past, and we worked in this project in Lake Ederse. In the beginning, we thought this project was kind of theoretical and a little bit, you know, betting into the future. It was an initiative that called for 20 different architects to design a house in this beautiful town, or very little town outside of in Germany, it's near the Lake Edersee. It's really not so near to Kassel, more or less, and they were called. The call was asking for houses that would take in account this new way of life, which is living and working in the same space. At that time, I thought, well, living and working in the same space is not new. It's something that has happened through all humanity, and that's actually what happens, but actually it's until very recent in human history, that we have decided to divide it and to work in a space and live in another one. And for me, it was interesting to understand, why have we done that division, and why can't we understand that a space should be for any human to do anything, first of all. And second of all, isn't the house a work environment when you domestic and reproductive labor? Isn't that work? So for me, it's not a new way of living. For me, it's a way of living. But we thought, well, how can we really create an environment that would, for me, the basic necessity for a refugee is to protect yourself from the environment. That's why a human needs to have a roof under its head. But as humanity, we also have proved that caves are not enough for us, that they protect us from the environment, but they're not enough. We need a space that inspires our lives, that really becomes that platform for us to become that individual that it's able to have a relationship beyond it. So how can we create living spaces that, or spaces that protect us, but that inspire us? And in this case, this is why we decided to be analyzing activities or emotions way more than labeling programs, So we decided to create this chart, which obviously is not comprehensive enough. It's never comprehensive enough. It's not as partial enough as it should be. It cannot be, because there's always us behind. But anyway, we tried to understand what would be those spaces that we were thinking that could become spaces that enhance in many ways an individual and its relationships towards its immediate circle and towards its community, and then to the larger collective. So we created, we decided that this house, or well, I didn't want to call it a house, that this space would have 6 different places. And so we defined those spaces with words that are kind of open-ended. We thought that having a program is restricting too much and directing too much the way we live. And so this is why we decided to open those definitions of those spaces in a more descriptive way of what emotions and activities happen there and what are the things that are there promoting. And then we decided to collage them. I'm not going to go into why we collage, because that's a whole other discussion. But we decided to, in this case, to use the collage as a tool for the process of the project. And what we did is why? Because it was very helpful to help us define those spaces in images. We are image driven, of course. We are architects, so we are always looking at things. So we decided to do it. Also, what it was very good, it was the whole team was able to participate, because for me, it's not the same what I interpret, what I call a landscape, that for someone else. So we together collaged these six different spaces. And at the end, we got 6 collages. We defined 6 spaces, and their problem started, because what do we do next? We decided to create one composition out of those 6 collages. This is the result of it. We traced that drawing, and then we started to shape the house. I don't know if at the end we arrived to a result where really this becomes a platform for living rather than a house. Probably if you see it, it can be a house, you know, and it could be the same result as if we started saying, yeah, this space needs 2 rooms and a bathroom and a kitchen. But recently, like 8 months ago, we got a person that wanted to build this house in the site. So we're working with them now, and we actually found out that they had interpreted the space very differently from what we did, or not so from what we did, but that was the most beautiful moment ever, you know. So they decided that the most relegated space from the community and from the ground should be the kitchen, and they decided that the most kind of connected space should be one of the rooms. They work with different things, so it makes a lot of sense. But I really like the idea that they really had an open platform for them to decide which spaces to be used as how they wanted. So now we're working into the process to building this house, which is really exciting in Germany, and we'll see. I think that this really needs to go further, and it really needs to get to a result where really architecture becomes that platform for each of us to design their own way of living. I think one of the most important moments in our career has been the moment where we decided to participate in rebuilding houses for the earthquake. And that was when we really understood that we really understood how to enter the discussion of the agency of the architect, which doesn't mean that I really understand what is the architect should do or what role should play, not yet. But it really has started fueling that discussion internally. And we have really decided that there is a discussion very important to have among architects, and that is that we think we build for the other, no? And we think that we include the other, and we think that we do know what is best for everybody and what is the way everybody should live, and that everybody should decide how, no? So we decided to only give technical advice to families to build their own houses and be the agents of bringing funds to rebuild the houses. We're almost done with 52 homes in this little town, which is San Simon, and some others in other towns. And so one of the major problems on why these houses failed is because they were badly built. Because 30 years ago, when NAFTA agreement came into place, NAFTA is a treaty, not free commerce treaty, but it's a commerce treaty between Canada, USA, and Mexico. And what happened is that it completely transformed the way we consume in this country. I think in the 3 countries the same, but mostly in our country, and the way we build houses. So this has been only 30 years. Into these little towns, materials that never had been there before arrived. Cheap steel bars and blocks, concrete blocks, and cement arrived to a place where they built with earth and with bricks done by them, and with palm or with carrizo or with whatever. And they started then seeing this as, as you can see here in the back, as progress. So they started building with those materials. What happened that they don't know how to use them, they don't know how to build a foundation for those materials, and then 500,000 homes were destroyed. What we did is we started working with these people, and we started understanding where was the possibility for us to help them build their own space. We, in the beginning, said there's no possibility we can understand the way these people live. These are very remote towns that we don't know. We need to act fast. So therefore, we're going to leave these people to decide how to live. So some families decided things that we were not agreeing completely. For example, one family decided to build a house with rooms that have no windows. And we definitely said that is not good. Windows are needed for ventilation and for illumination. And they were saying no, because this is the most unsafe street in the town. We live right facing to it, and we don't want these rooms to have their windows towards that ground. We don't need the windows. We have enough ventilation and illumination because we're out the whole day, and we just need spaces for sleeping, and we ventilate through little ventilation spots here. And although we didn't agree, and for us was outrageous, that house was built without windows. And this is really when we decided, what is the agency of the architect? What is the why do we need to impose an understanding of a living if it is not our way of living, no? So this is when I say we have to confront ourselves to the exact opposite of what you think you are or you can see, in order to understand that there are many others that really, really are exactly the opposite of you, and that they also have the same right of you to decide how to live and how to do their own spaces, no? Another project that is trying to, or aiming to understand those possibilities, you know, is this one, which is questioning the vertical realm. We have really understood that for cities, suburbs don't work. They are too disconnected. They need to become, instead of suburbs and part of the periphery, each of them their own center. So therefore, we need to understand how to manage density in a determined land. One of the interesting ways of doing it is with you know, height. And but right now that typology, it's another kind of suburb. For me, it's a suburb. It's really a place that disconnects you from the ground, from the city. It is only linked with the floor ground, but the rest, it is really alienating you from the richness of the city. So we decided to work towards a possibility of a more organic way of developing the vertical realm. And in this case was an exquisite corpse. It was first done in a studio in Colombia. Then it was presented in the Chicago Architectural Biennial. And then we have done some other iterations for different explorations in a very experimental way. But I think one of the aims of those is really to tackle the point of each individual being able to be represented in a space that creates the richness and the diversity we need to understand our environment, no? And that is one of the most, I think, interesting reflections that I have been trying to pursue since the understanding that the 20th century have searched for democracy and equality. Well, although we haven't achieved it, unfortunately, yet, we need to think that the 21st century should be about including, yes, we all need an equal basis of opportunities and of developments, but how we can be, each of us, included on it, you know? Democracy tended to homogenize decisions, to homogenize the ground, and that meant equality. For me, actually, that bans equality because it imposes a way of living and a way of understanding towards the surrounding that it's only a vision of a few, and it doesn't really include the vision of each of us. So how can, in the 21st century, in the built environment, but we as architects, but in the society at large, in every way, we can think of the possibility of, in an equal ground, embrace the diversity of on which we are built on, of the 7 billion people that we exist, to understand how we could create these stages of relationships that would allow us to understand that other, that it's completely different from us, and that we, by creating these stages of relationships, can really probably start to reach and arrive to that place where we can even be able to protect the environment. And I think that with this idea, and probably the image of the confrontation of the architecture with the environment in the aquarium, I will finish my talk, and I will leave it, maybe if there's time, questions and comments, I would be very happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Tatiana, thank you so much. That's fantastic. If you unshare your screen, we can see you again. Yeah, if people have questions or comments, just dump your name in the chat box and I'll unmute you. Yeah, I mean, I was, as I said at the beginning, Tatiana, I mean, your work's the portfolio of work that you have in the office is very striking. The diversity of it, from work that's in the field of social housing to houses which are really very bespoke, and you know, for individual clients, which you kind of showed some. And I wondered if the impulse, that the enjoyment that you have in giving away authorship in the social housing projects, the enjoyment you have in the contribution of others, actually shaping the way that those buildings take shape. Is that something that you're interested in also bringing to the more monumental buildings, should we say, or the more expensive buildings, or do you see how do you see your ideas of authorship being changed by the experience you had on working on that low-cost housing?
I would say that there are many stages of that possibility. And again, I think that we have to learn also that there is no way we can still continue living with binaries, you know, so there's not one way or the other. I think that definitely in the domestic realm should be really important that we think that architects could be one piece, no, of the production of the habitat of anyone, but we could not keep thinking that we could be those ones that define that, no? But in the other case, on a more public building that would serve a collective, it's really hard how to, you know, manage those set of relationships in order to create a platform that everybody would decide what the building look like, no? That is very difficult in terms of many things, no? But I think that in that case is how to understand that the building becomes that space for dialogue, that space for conflicts to be encountered and solved, and how that can become a space that that it is a platform. And for me, a platform is something that it's flat for all to be able to evolve, no? And yeah, the question of authorship in those spaces exists and will remain and do exist, no? But how the author works and how the author acts is, I think, the question here, no? So it's going to be an imposition on or it's going to become that author that has said the first sentence of that conversation that will take a path to anywhere that the collective will take it, no? So I think that there are different aspects of authorship that should be tackled. And as I said, I think that right now we're opening this Pandora box where I don't have the answers for everything. And I was trying to explain you how, okay, after a mental ill person first has to accept the problem, then has to understand what is the problem, and then the process of starting to try to give solutions is what is next. So what what have we done is like, first, I think we have accepted that we're part of this problem. And then through all those reflections that we have done through our whole career, but putting these more in the table, are able to identify them in which ways we do them in one or the other project. And what we're doing right now during the pandemic, and especially the last weeks, is teams in the office have been sitting to review each of the projects with all these precepts. What are the moments of discrimination in this project? What are the moments of authorship imposing power? What are the moments of an inclusion of others in this project and or the other, in specific projects and specific moments and specific parts of it, you know, this wall, this fence, this plaza, this kitchen, and we're there. We're just actually last week we had a presentation of each team towards the whole office of each of the projects that they have been analyzing. And obviously the next step is taking them into accountants in the projects that we're developing. And the next stage would be, you know, to understand how to even proceed with it further on, you know, for those developments.
I mean, I was intrigued. I think I said at the beginning, the next presentation we have tonight is Hugh Strange talking about W.R. Letherby, this great arts and crafts architect who had a particular interest in empowering the craftsmen that he worked with, in reducing the scope of drawn information so that he could work with craftspeople who had an agency in the process. I wondered if the way your buildings are made is also, you know, if this discussion about inclusivity extends to the you know, who makes the buildings and what kind of agency they have in that process.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing that I didn't mention, but I think that was one of the first reflections I did in my career. So early on, I was asked by Gabriel Orozco, the artist, to help him with his house in Puerto Escondido. And he had done the design, but I had the task to make it possible and real and physical in a very small place, in a very remote, small place in the coast of Oaxaca. And in the beginning, we were working in the workshop, like in my office or his workshop, you know, doing beautiful drawings. We really spent probably 8 months, you know, like intellectualizing this project and overdrawing it. And then we decided very early on that we would build only with people of the community, although they didn't knew how to use these materials. But we thought it was good for, you know, kind of starting to know the community, but also giving a little bit of an economical support because they really have very little jobs, etc. So, and then very soon, obviously, I realized how patronizing this was. But on the second hand, very soon I realized, and I think the most important lesson was how important were those hands to build this house, and how unimportant was the whole process of 8 months. We really were, they were not necessary. We could have arrived only with the first drawing that Gabriel had in the beginning and sit there, because that's what actually we did. All the drawings that we did were left in the office, and we arrived there and we worked with the people. How important was to understand who was going to build this place in order to be able to achieve it, you know? And at that time I was working with architecture that was not defined by geometry. You know, I was part of the generation of parametric architecture, which I was never really into it because I would never had the tools. I live in Mexico. I studied in Mexico. We had not the technology. Actually, in my university at that time, we had one class with that would teach us how to use AutoCAD. So parametric architecture was only a dream. you know, and obviously what we were seeing in the magazines, but we still wanted to do like these uncharted forms and, you know, architecture that would respond more to an idea of a parameter than a real physical proposal. And this is when I understood, well, if it was really difficult enough to be able to transmit how to build this house, that it has only pure geometric forms, how can I think that I would do angles that are not even easily described, you know, physically? So this is when I decided that it is not necessary in this context to build anything beyond what geometry can allow us to think of, and to transmit, and to really use the most basic possibilities of communication with lines and with drawings in order to build, because of the hands that were going to build our buildings. And although we encounter this very extreme possibility impossibility in Roca Blanca, where we build the house of Gabriel, this is something that we really, that is really what happens everywhere, you know, like these people are the ones that migrate to cities. This is the first job they get is in the construction sector. And this is the people that build everywhere, at least in Mexico, you know, they're not trained and they're hyper creative and they're hyper open. So how can you include them on that? No? And for example, the next project we did was the house in Ajijic with earth. And what we did is we learned from the people who did work with the earth physically, and then we designed the project. No, so this is something that we have been doing since ever, and we understand. No, and the first thing we do when we do a job is who's going to build it, how it's going to be built, how are you going to manage the construction, and then to understand how to go to the design with those constraints. Or I don't see them as constraints, I see as facts of the project, you know. So how do we approach it with that in mind?
We've got a question from Philip Christou. Philip, you've got the microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello, Philip.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. That was delightful, your talk. And I really like the way that you went through the different parts of the house and tried to interrogate, you know, really what we can do in the bedroom, in the kitchen, and rethink the conception of those things. That was really, really lovely, and completely open-ended. It opens up lots of questions that we all can think about. But I would just have one question about when you talk about platform, or you know, how what you can offer as an architect. I was wondering whether, do you mean that you're trying to offer a possibility for change in the future of the architecture?
More than for change, is for evolution, I would like to say, you know, to evolve. And I would say that for me, the idea of platform is how we architects can become part of that process of any type of part of the process that defines a space of any type, you know. So instead, for example, in the reconstruction, we became part of that, no? But we were not the ones deciding how to build, where to build, and what we normally architects do. We just were part of the process, becoming a part of the platform that supports the process of each of their families building their own house, you know. And we bring things to the table that could be very helpful. For example, the understanding of the materials that we're using with. No, in that case, I'm talking specifically on that case. So we know how to build with bricks, with concrete blocks, and with steel and with cement, while they know how they live. You know, we don't need to understand that, because we're never going to understand it. As I said, like, we architects tend to think that we can understand a context, no? And the first thing we do is we create an analysis of site analysis, and we will understand everything. a historical analysis, a site analysis, you know, like an economical analysis of the place. Now we know all, okay, now we start the project. Well, guess what? You're never gonna understand it. Nothing of that, no? So how can you insert yourself or becoming one part of that and being part of that team that cooperates and that really has the whole, as a whole, the knowledge to build one thing, no?
Okay.
So this is my idea of the architect becoming part of that to build a platform that will then build spaces.
And it can evolve.
And that can evolve, yeah.
Yeah, and through that process of the design and also through the process of living in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And then one second question, which follows on from Ellis's question about authorship, I suppose. So what the role that you play then, with let's say you have these people who already know how to build with a certain material, say with earth or something, and you can learn from them. And so the craftsmanship of the building is that you're learning a lot of that from the people who already know that. And similarly, you're also learning about how a certain community lives, which is different than the way that you live. Yeah. Then what is it that you're offering? In my view, it's something that's beyond the utility of the building. It's something, like you said, that inspires us, and you said in the home, or we might call it delight. Yeah. So
I hope
yeah.
Sorry.
Don't you think? So that, I mean, what is it that actually we architects can bring to the process of that evolution?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yes, I think, and again, I think that there is not one single answer to that. I think it's depending in the place where you find yourself in,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that it can be that, for example, for that family that had really a very clear decision of how their house was, the ones who built with no windows, we bring the technical expertise of making them, you know, like of understanding how to build with steel bars and how to place the foundation and how, you know. But maybe to the other family, to the house that I showed to Doña Toña, which we did the house with them, with the bricks and the earth rendering on top, to how to create a nice celosía with the bricks, you know.
Yeah.
And that is a very little piece that it's a beautiful element, an aesthetic element that will create a nicer, well, nicer for me, but a moment of inspiration in their life, you know. And it depends. Maybe to the other family, it inspires the way that they have a strong house and that will not fall. And to the other one, it inspires them that they have this beautiful celosía that they allow the light to come in different ways, you know. So I think that it's the where you to find yourself in the place where you can give the possibility of allowing the other to be inspired by the space they are inhabiting, no?